When was the last time you felt bored for hours? Not minutes, but hours, with nothing to distract you. No phone, no background noise, no quick escape. For most people, that moment is hard to remember. Not because life suddenly became meaningful, but because silence rarely lasts long enough to be felt. The moment boredom tries to surface, something fills the space. A screen, a sound, a scroll. There's always something to check, something to watch, something to scroll. And because of that, it feels like boredom has disappeared. But it hasn't. You're not less bored, you're more stimulated. There's a difference. Boredom is when nothing feels meaningful. Stimulation is what we use to avoid that feeling. Boredom feels threatening because it removes distraction, and when distraction disappears, the brain doesn't relax, it turns inward. In that quiet space, the mind starts searching for meaning. It asks simple, uncomfortable questions. Why doesn't this feel satisfying anymore? What am I actually doing all this for? Is this how my days are supposed to feel? These aren't dramatic questions. They're ordinary, and that's exactly why they're hard to ignore. So the brain looks for relief. Not because you're lazy, but because discomfort feels risky. The phone becomes emotional anesthesia, a fast way to mute the signal. One tap, and the questions fade. It's an instant exit door. Not from boredom itself, but from the meaning boredom is trying to point toward. When boredom appears, the brain doesn't shut down. It switches mode. A network called the default mode network, or DMN, becomes active. This is the part of the brain that works when you're not reacting to the world, but reflecting on it. In this state, the mind starts to wander. But mind wandering is not the same as distraction. Distraction pulls attention outward. Mind wandering pulls attention inward. This is where your brain connects distant ideas, reviews past experiences, and quietly plans ahead. It begins to see life as a story instead of a list of tasks. Short-term reactions slow down. Long-term thinking comes online. Instead of asking, "What do I do next?" the brain asks, "Where is this going?" That's why boredom often feels heavy, but also meaningful. In simple terms, boredom is your brain switching into meaning mode. When boredom shows up, the brain looks for relief, not meaning. And the fastest relief comes from dopamine. Dopamine isn't pleasure itself. It's the chemical that pushes you to seek something new. A message, a video, a distraction that promises change. Phones make this effortless. They offer a shortcut, instant stimulation, without effort or patience. For a moment, it works. The uncomfortable feeling fades. The mind feels occupied again. But the brain adapts quickly. What once felt satisfying becomes normal. Tolerance builds, and the same stimulation delivers less impact. So the relief shrinks. The urge grows. Over time, quiet moments feel sharper and harder to tolerate. Not because they're worse, but because sensitivity has changed. That's the trap. The more you escape boredom, the more sensitive you become to it. This is how the loop quietly forms. Stress builds during the day, so the phone becomes a release. Scrolling brings a short sense of relief. But when the screen goes dark, the stress doesn't disappear. It waits. Sleep starts to suffer. Late nights turn into restless nights. The mind stays half alert, never fully switching off. During the day, attention fragments. We call it multitasking, but the brain doesn't truly do that. It switches rapidly, burning energy with every shift. Each switch leaves a small residue of fatigue behind. Over time, this constant switching dulls emotional response. Nothing feels deeply engaging anymore. Not work, not rest, not even entertainment. There's no blame here. This isn't a personal failure or a lack of discipline. It's simply what happens when the brain stays in reaction mode for too long. Constant stimulation doesn't usually cause pain right away. It causes loss, quietly, over time. Meaning starts to leak. Days stay full, but they stop feeling purposeful. Moments blur together without leaving a clear emotional trace. Creativity fades next. Not because the mind is weak, but because it's never given space to wander. New ideas need emptiness to form. Without it, everything becomes repetitive. Pleasure also changes. Quick, shallow hits replace deeper satisfaction. Things feel fine, but rarely fulfilling. That's why nothing ever feels like enough. More content, more noise, more distraction, yet the sense of fullness never arrives. It's not that life becomes unbearable, it becomes flat, and flatness is easy to miss until it's everywhere. Boredom feels heavy because it isn't random. It's a signal trying to get your attention. It appears when something meaningful is missing, when the way you're spending your time no longer matches what your mind needs. Avoiding that signal doesn't remove it, it just transforms it. Unanswered boredom often turns into anxiety. The restlessness grows, but the source stays hidden. And when meaning is avoided for too long, the result isn't peace, it's emptiness. Silence becomes uncomfortable because it acts like a mirror. It reflects questions you've been postponing. That's why boredom is so hard to sit with. Boredom asks a question most people are afraid to answer. The way out of this loop isn't adding more stimulation. It's learning to stay with the discomfort you've been trained to escape. At first, this feels like withdrawal. When constant dopamine is removed, the mind becomes restless, dull, even impatient. Nothing feels interesting. Time moves slowly. That phase isn't failure, it's recalibration. As the brain adjusts, sensitivity begins to return. Dopamine receptors recover. Small experiences start to register again instead of slipping past unnoticed. This is why doing nothing feels so difficult. It's not laziness. It's nervous system training. You don't need long retreats or extreme rules. Just small daily spaces without escape, a walk without headphones, a few quiet minutes before sleep, not to force insight, but to give your mind room to breathe. Boredom was never a flaw in your mind. It was a guide you were taught to ignore. When you stop fighting it, attention slowly returns. Not the frantic kind, but the steady kind that lets you stay with a moment. Thoughts settle, feelings become clearer. Ordinary life starts to feel richer again. Walks have texture, conversations carry weight. Even quiet moments feel complete instead of empty. Nothing dramatic changes on the outside, but something important shifts on the inside. A sense of direction without force. Boredom doesn't take meaning away. It leads you back to it. Doing nothing isn't wasting time. It's where the groundwork is laid for creativity, for clarity, for direction. When you stop running from boredom, life slowly starts to feel full again. If this made you see boredom a little differently, take a moment and think about it. How do you usually deal with boredom? Do you escape it or do you sit with it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them and they help shape future videos. And if you enjoy psychology that actually explains you, consider subscribing. We go deeper here, calmly, honestly, and without noise.